Welcome to the Resilience Files, a podcast investigating human stories of struggle and triumph in the quest to explore the true nature of well-being and resilience and discover the secret to a resilience that lasts. Our guest today, Michelle Leigh, set up the Oli Leigh Trust after she lost her beloved son Ollie at 16 to suicide. The Oli Leigh Trust is a suicide prevention and mental well-being trust, granting funds to small charities that can deliver suicide prevention and well-being training. First of all, I want to acknowledge that conversations like this are hard to hear, but we absolutely need to hear them, have them, and debate the issues. We owe it to our children. You might not agree with all of the views expressed by Michelle or myself in this conversation, but the most important thing is that we get to talk, to listen to each other, and learn from each other. Michelle is open, honest, and I would venture to say damning on her perspective of how the system failed Ollie and played a part in his taking his life by suicide. Michelle is a force to be reckoned with, and you will no doubt pick up on her determination to provide the education that she feels is sorely lacking in our schools to our teachers around how to deal with children who are struggling like Ollie. Ollie was a boy who had everything going for him. He was polite, confident, and full of love. His friends looked to him for both inspiration and support. Ollie was always the perfect gentleman. He would dominate a room with his personality and charisma. Yet Michelle has said that this was perhaps a front to cover underlying insecurities. Sport played a big part in Ollie's life. He played football for the London Lions, was referred for the Hertfordshire League, and played rugby for Harrow RFC. Ollie, for most of his short life, excelled academically at school, especially at mathematics. This was a boy who had everything going for him and had so much to contribute. As Michelle says in this conversation, suicide is preventable, and as a society, we need to do more to stop this epidemic. There are many ways to support the important work the Oli Leigh Trust is doing. Please visit their website, olileightrust.org, which you'll find in the notes below. Okay, so welcome to the Resilience Files, Michelle. Thanks for joining me. Oh, you're so welcome. So, Michelle, I was thinking about this conversation, and I was thinking that my experience is that people are scared to talk about suicide. It's like a taboo subject. It's like we can't go there. They get very uncomfortable to talk about it. And I want to ask you in this conversation some kind of what might be quite probing questions. And please feel free to push back if anything I ask is inappropriate. But I just feel it's so essential to understand this topic if we're going to find a solution to it. And, you know, from my own experience of kind of suicide attempts in my life, which, were, thank God, quite a while ago, obviously it's a subject that I've reflected on a lot. But, unfortunately, you've become an expert, on this because of the tragedy in your own life and then the work that you've subsequently undertaken to make a difference. And so with that in mind, I was looking at your website and I saw that on your website, so the Oli Leigh Trust, under our vision, it starts off by saying the Oli Leigh Trust believes suicide is preventable, not inevitable. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. So I wanted to start off by asking you, what do you think are the biggest myths that people generally have about suicide and suicide prevention?
Well, I think the general myth about suicide is that somebody is completely mentally unstable, but I don't believe that is the case. I believe that actually they're very calm. It's very calculated. It's a planned death. Every step they take to killing themselves, to taking their lives, they've thought about it, and they've made that action on their own. So I always believe it's the best way to describe it is probably it's a cancer you can't see, and it's because if you've got, God forbid, cancer, then you go to the doctor and you get fixed, and everyone knows that you're getting fixed, etc. But with a mental issue, a mental health problem, is you can hide it from anyone at all. You can hide it, and that is the problem, that you don't actually see the issue, and therefore it's so calculated when they do
Mm-hmm.
take their lives.
So you're saying, like, if I just want to understand you correctly, that people might make the assumption that this is something that you can spot a million miles away. The person's going to be like, it's going to be so obvious that this person is somebody who might take their lives. And you're saying that that's, I'm sure it's sometimes the case that a person will say that this person's been threatening to take their life, et cetera, et cetera. But you're saying sometimes it's invisible. It's almost something that's under the surface. You might know a person struggling, but they're planning and calculating something in quite a thought out way, and the people around them might not be
That's
aware of that at
100%.
all.
What I'm
Is
saying
that
is
what you're
that you
saying?
don't know that
Yeah.
that person is planning their death, and that you don't know that they're
Mm,
struggling,
mm,
because from
mm,
the outside they look fine. They
mhm.
may be behaving a
Yes.
little bit erratic and not normal, as in inverted brackets normal, but they're not. Nobody can
Mm,
know what's going on inside someone's head, and therefore you don't.
yes.
When you hear about someone who's taken their life, it's always the shock, because you can't see the illness, and it's an
Mm,
illness. It's not
mm,
a it's not a cry for help, because the help's gone. You can't help
mhm,
them once they've gone.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
an illness that has been eaten away inside them, that they don't know how to express, and so their only way out is by taking their lives.
Well, it's funny you saying that because I myself don't think about it as an illness. I see it more as it seems like the only solution to the pain that you're suffering. As you say, it seems like the escape route, and that's the escape route that your mind gives you. And what was interesting for me is that as a young person growing up, every time I felt in pain, I felt in psychological pain, I was in psychological pain, instead of like, some people think I'm going to go and go for a run, or I'm going to watch a movie, or I'm going to call a friend or something. My mind immediately went to a picture of like a gun at my head, or a picture of some kind of violent picture of me escaping this life. And I don't know why that happened. I remember from a very young age, it's almost like I had this visual thing of like a gun shooting at my head or something, some very kind of violent way of just, I got to get out of here. It was just this impulsive, I got to get out of here. It felt like, that was always like my solution to being in physical pain. I mean, seemed to be on the table, where for a lot of people, they have something that's, even if it's sometimes unhealthy, it's a little more measured. But I've always been fascinated by that, why some people, this comes up as a solution, and some people who I've met who've been in equally horrific pain, that hasn't come up as a solution. Maybe that's something we'll never
We
know,
won't
but
know. We won't know. There's a massive gap
yeah, yeah.
in that between what we know and what they do. I think that's going to
Yeah, yeah.
continue, because that's what suicide is.
Mm,
It's the silent killer. It's the killer
mm,
inside your head, and there's no one who can read what's
mm.
inside you. Whether you know, there's absolutely nobody who can read your thoughts. Only you can express your thoughts, and if you're not taught to express
Very
your
much so.
thoughts, they're going to eat inside you and eat you up
Mm.
and destroy you.
Well, I love, one of the things we teach young people in our heart and older people is about the fact that we live in our own separate realities, and that no one can get into the hearts and minds of any other person. And even as a parent or as a person in a close family who you think, I've lived with this person, I know this person so well, you can never, ever, ever know another person's reality. And it's a very difficult thing often for parents, because you think, well, I do know my child, but we don't know what's in the hearts and minds, and human beings are complex creatures. And as you say, and I want to talk to you throughout this podcast about how we can help our children with this. And I think one of the ways, as you're saying, is to teach them more to be able to communicate, what they're feeling and thinking. So it just kind of, that bridge is not so wide, that gap is not so wide. And myself as a teenager, I found it very difficult to express myself. I went inwards. that's what I did. So, which is very common. But that's something throughout this podcast I want to speak to, because I think it's something you've probably thought deeply about, which is how can we help our children, and especially I know their parents, and it's one of the questions I have for you, because I'm sure parents are thinking, well, if it's invisible and you don't know, and etc., um, they start to get paranoid. And they start to think, is this regular teenage moodiness and struggle? Because a lot of teenagers struggle, or is this something more? So that's something I do want to address maybe a little bit later. But I first want to go back to a little bit to the beginning, where this all started. And can you tell us a little bit about Ali and what he was like growing up, and, just your experience of Ali as a youngster? I mean, were there signs that he was going to struggle in life when he was younger, in his formative years?
Yeah, so my children had a life very different to other children that I know of to date. Um, when Oliver
Mm-hmm.
was 4, on his 4th birthday, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So he was at nursery,
Wow.
and his nursery teachers took him home in the afternoon because I couldn't look after him, obviously. Um, Scott was in reception school, so he was taken care of all day. But um, I, so he was pushed around a little bit when he was little. And then obviously I survived
Mm-hmm.
17 years now. And yeah,
Unbelievable. Just
yeah,
really, that's fantastic.
thank
You
you.
look
Thank you.
fantastic. Mm-hmm.
And then his
Yeah.
father left when he was 7, and he's never seen him since,
Wow.
or heard from him.
Wow.
Um, and his
Mm-hmm.
father really favoured his elder brother, and it always showed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Oliver had a problem with authority, as far as he should have had a dad to tell him what to do and not someone else to tell him what to do. But saying all that, he
Mm-hmm.
was the most charitable, academic, incredibly clever, beautiful young man with perfect manners,
Mm-hmm.
a great sportsman, always there for
Mm-hmm.
his friends, always there for someone on the streets who'd go and buy a burger for them or something if they saw them sitting there eating without any, on the ground cold. He did a lot for Jewish
Mm-hmm.
charities and non-Jewish charities. He worked probably every 3 weekends for a charity, which people don't know about. Um, he didn't need to shout about
Wow.
it. He didn't need to let
Wow.
people know what he was up to. He didn't. That was the kind of person he was. He was very humble. He was a brilliant artist.
Mm-hmm.
He pushed a few buttons, to say the least. You don't just suddenly decide to take your life without
Mm-hmm.
pushing a few buttons. A child, that is,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily an adult, but I'm only talking as a child. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when he got told off at school, they still found it quite hard to tell him off at his first school
Mm-hmm.
because he was so cute and cheeky and concerned about the person talking to them. So if they were telling them off during their lunch break, he used
Mm-hmm.
to say, "Well, you really need to go and have something to eat. I know I'm taking up your time." And it was like,
Oh, he's
he was a
charming.
charmer,
He's a charmer.
completely charming.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If
Uh-huh.
unfortunately, if the girls got themselves into trouble, as in they were drunk at the weekends or something, he would be there to assist them, look after them, make sure they got home okay. Um, he was just
Oh,
a
wow.
great, great boy, but underneath all that, he was very troubled, and he he didn't communicate it or articulate it in the correct way. He articulated it by
Yes.
being naughty, I suppose, inverted commas, at school. But no child is born naughty. There's got to be a reason behind them being naughty. And he went from an A-star student down to a U student. He didn't do any work at all, which I wasn't not informed about. If I knew he wasn't working,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been on him because I'm very big on education. Um, and I feel that he was failed completely. He was failed by his father. He was failed by his
Mm-hmm.
school. Um,
Mhm.
He was failed by his psychiatrist that he went to see, because he was so
Mhm.
clever that he hid everything and they just didn't see it. And I think that is
Mhm.
because they're not educated enough to look for the signs of why a student suddenly goes from an A star down to a U. There's got to be a really good reason. This child wanted to go and study maths at Cambridge. It wasn't just a whim, it was
Mhm.
he could have done it. So I feel the system has failed him. And I think we have failed the system by not requesting the training for the teachers to be educated as well. I think it's a two-sided thing. I think the government needs to sit up and start listening to our schools and teachers, that if we don't educate from when they're a young age, they're not going to be able to continue with life. And life is a lot tougher than we went to school. A lot tougher. I mean, social media is
Definitely.
horrendous.
Mm.
It's a brilliant
Mm.
tool for
Mm.
finding out information academically and for the
Mhm.
news. Um,
Mhm.
but the
Mm.
minute you do something, it will be spread all over the world and you can't erase it. And I think it's a very dangerous tool.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, I mean, first of all, going back to Ali, he sounds just such a charming, charismatic, loving, sensitive soul. Because when you're so sensitive to others' needs, and it's very unusual for a teenager to be quietly under the radar, giving of himself. Usually it's like in that way that you're saying, working for charities, concerned about other people. And it's sometimes those sensitive souls that feel things very
Mhm.
deeply, as you're saying, and also can also at times want to not want to trouble people, want to kind of not be a burden on people, or not sitting there moaning, needing, demanding, etc. In the way that you can see this child really needs help. But it sounds like you're saying you did see that Ali, at a certain age, was struggling psychologically
Yeah.
because he went to a psychiatrist. So obviously what, how did that manifest? Did he come and tell you he was depressed or anxious, or you saw that, or
Um, well,
how did
getting
that
into
happen?
trouble more than he's ever got into trouble at all in a space of 8 months. Uh,
How old was he at that stage? Just
he
to.
was 15, 16. So he changed schools in
Mm-hmm.
March. It was Purim, in March 2017, and he died in May 18. So it only took for him to be at this school a year for him to take his life. And they changed him completely.
Wow.
100% changed the person he was. They basically
Wow.
stripped away everything that he had inside him of value. Um,
Mm-hmm. How
by
do
the
how
way
do you
they
see that
treated him
happen?
in the school, they bullied me, they bullied him,
Mm-hmm.
didn't look into the reasons why behind. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge problem, is that when you get branded, that's it. That is
Mm-hmm.
it. And I think that you
Mm-hmm.
need to look, the reason why they're behaving how they're behaving there's a reason. You don't wake up
Mm-hmm.
one day and decide to to behave that way going forward. There's got to be a very good reason. Um,
Yeah.
so I sent him to see
Yeah.
someone and he attended, but he didn't really get what he should have done from this particular person. And I realized it was the wrong person for
Mm-hmm.
him, but it was a few weeks away from his
Mm-hmm.
GCSEs. And I thought, I'm not going to change now because he just
Mm-hmm.
needs to concentrate on his exams. So after his exams, I was going
Yes.
to change
Yes.
him, but that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Michelle, when you say what you're saying about the teachers in the school, it kind of breaks my heart. In some of our hot sessions, there's a lot of focus on this. It's like seeing who a person is inside, and it's seeing, we've got this quote by Nelson Mandela: "Man's goodness is like a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished." and it talks about the goodness, and we speak about how Mandela saw the goodness in his the people who were holding him captive, and that was like the start of what. But we we've got sessions on seeing what's behind the mask of like anger, etc., and seeing the hurt behind it, and seeing that when people behave badly, we've actually got a very powerful video we show the children, it's a video of young child actors who speak about, they start off like being like kind of almost bullies, and they like saying like, we hate you and you're this and you're that, and they like kind of bullying, and then they start to say, why are they saying that? They go, we hate you because we were beat up at home, or we hate you because our father, and you start to see that it's hurt, that all kind of bad behavior, what's behind it is hurt. I often say that when you're at peace with yourself, you're at peace with the world. When you're at war with yourself, you're at war with the world. That was my experience of being at peace or at war with myself. And that whenever there's a child is showing some kind of behavior that's not ideal, you want to look what's happening inside, because there's hurt behind that. And that's what we tell parents, that's what you want to parent to, and teachers, that's what you want to look into. And whenever I go into classrooms, and we used to do that a lot more than I do now, but I just used to see that I could appreciate from the teacher's perspective, they don't have the training that you say, many of them, most of them, and they're trying to get through and hit their targets and get through sessions with 30 children. And the children who are disrupting, etc., just look like they're a nuisance and getting in the way and troublemakers. And so they deal with them. They're frustrated, they tense, they're stressed. But, when I'm sitting there, and obviously it's not my class and it's not my job, I just see that little person who probably hasn't slept that night, who's stressed, etc., who's exhausted, who's coping with something, who's putting his head on the desk, not because he's being disrespectful, but because that's the only way he can get through the lesson. And, and he's just kind of kicked out and screamed at as if he's bad. And I kind of, maybe it's because I grew up, I've got 6 boys at home, and I've seen the innocence of kids and what they're going through. And so to be perfect in that classroom, it's almost impossible, and especially for someone who's really struggling and grappling. And I agree with you, because that kind of training, that teachers can have that sensitivity and see that the ones who are struggling and who have the worst behavior are the ones that we need to be the kindness and give the most love to. And yes, we have to find realistic ways with handling that classroom situation, but they're the ones that we have to sit afterwards and say, look, I know you're a beautiful child. How can I support you? What's going on? Because this isn't you. Or, or how can we, those are the ones that need the most kindness, but it's not so intuitive, because often you just feel like they're getting in the way of me teaching my session, and I'm not going to hit, and I'm going to, get into trouble. And it's just, so I'm so with you that I feel that training is essential.
Listen, I do understand when you're in a classroom and it's the GCSE year, and there's other kids in that class who really want to study and really want to get a good grade, that if you've got someone in the class who's stopping and starting it all the time, it's very frustrating. And I understand that. Listen, I'm not completely like my child was Mr. Perfect. I completely understand from that point of view, but deal with it in a way that is constructive and not destructive. And they destroyed my son, completely and utterly destroyed him. And that is why I'm on a mission. I like to call myself a mummy on a mission, to make sure that we get the right training for our teachers, our carers, our children, our parents, our employees, everybody out there, to have this training so that they know how to deal with a situation when it occurs. Because I've never had any training till recently. And, as a mother, you don't come with a rule book. I mean, my guidance was my sister. She had 3 older ones than mine, and whatever she did right, I followed, and whatever I felt she didn't do right, I didn't do myself. But she was the only guidebook I had, and who's to say what she did was the right? It's only our principles that I go on, which was the right. So, I mean, if you take students who are studying medicine, so my eldest son's studying medicine, they are not taught how to deal with a suicide patient that comes in to the hospital. So these are our youth coming forward,
Mm-hmm.
going into hospital, and when someone comes in and they've tried to take in their lives or they're behaving suicidal, students are not taught how to deal with that. And if our
Yeah.
medical
Yeah. It's
staff are not
crazy.
being taught how to deal with that, how can we expect our teaching staff to be able to deal with it? And that
Mm-hmm.
is why
Mm-hmm.
it is so
Yeah.
important to get training for absolutely everybody in every industry, college,
Mm-hmm.
school, education, wherever, even clubs, even football. If you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
responsible for a child, you need to have complete training. And it's not just how to, the offside rule. The offside rule could be the child who's on the offside. How do you deal with the child who's on the offside rule?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they need to be educated with.
Yeah. 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 No, I hear you. And to me, that's the preventative side because it sounds like what you're saying, it doesn't need to get to the point where this person feels so hopeless and so bad about themselves in the world that they see no other way, but suicide. You're saying because there's a way that we can support and help this person see that they love themselves and that there's a way forward and support them in that way forward. And, because I was thinking that, some children are kind of naughty in class or disruptive or etc. I had one like that just because he's like gets a bit bored and so he makes a bit of trouble, and he was annoying to the teachers, etc. But I think as a blanket rule, it's seeing that there's just, as you say, it's often equated that somebody who's compliant is good to go, and we must support them. And the people who aren't compliant, or are disruptive, etc., or aren't ideal students, those ones are bad, and we must deal with them in a punitive way, And as you say, that can be detrimental. And the truth is, by the way, that what I've also seen is that sometimes the ones who aren't misbehaving, who are very good,
Yeah.
are also suffering. And so there's training on that as well. How do we pick up those ones who are so good and sitting in class and look like the perfect student, etc. And meanwhile they're really, really struggling. So that's something else that, I think we as a society need to see, and to see that the ones who look like they're doing good are
No,
not
I
always
mean, I
doing
don't
so
think any
good.
child is bad, number one. I don't think anyone is bad. I
Mm-hmm.
think someone is bad is a different scale to somebody who's misbehaving in the classroom. Um, I just think
Mm-hmm.
there's loads of reasons. There's so many reasons. No one life is like an onion, I always say. You just don't know what the reason is until you start peeling off all the layers. And um,
Mm-hmm.
I used to call my children Perfect Peter and Horrid Henry. And sometimes they did swap, but Scott was pretty much Perfect Peter.
Yes.
He pretty much put his head
Yeah.
down and studied and, was couldn't believe it if he didn't get an A star over an A. He was the child that everybody loved from an educational point of view. But that doesn't mean to say he doesn't have a
Mm-hmm.
set of issues on the other side. And I'm not saying he does have any, but I'm just saying as
Mm-hmm.
a parent, I know every child will have a set of issues. There isn't any child who has grown
Mm-hmm.
up and lives in a world of fairy tales and unicorns. There's no such thing. Um, no,
No human
nobody, none
beings.
of us do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get to a point where you have to be
Mm-hmm.
responsible for what you do, but that's only if you're able to see things
Mm-hmm.
clearly. And um, not
Mm-hmm.
everyone can see things clearly, and it doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah.
You could have had the perfect childhood, but your adult life may not be great. But you you can't
Mm.
dismiss anybody in this world from how they're perceiving themselves to the outside world. That's
Yeah.
I think that's what
Very much so.
we have to stop and think, that just because someone's got a new car or they're going on holiday or they're moving into a new home or um, it doesn't make your life any less better than theirs. They could be living on credit. You may not have an overdraft, they may do. You just don't know what's going on, and you can't judge anybody because everyone's life is personal, and therefore you've got to give so much respect and calmness to that person because you just don't
Yeah.
understand. No one can understand why someone acts how they act because they haven't acted
Yeah.
it. And I just
Yeah.
I think
Very much so.
we just need to give everybody a bit of a break. I think everyone in this TikTok world and world of Photoshop, where everything is perfect and they make everything look
Mhm.
perfect. They've got to understand
Yeah.
that, I mean, you just saw me without makeup on, right? I went, oh, I better go put some face makeup on.
Yeah, you try.
Just
Yeah,
because
yeah,
not only this
yeah,
looks great, but
yeah.
it looks a bit better, because how you look to the world is what everyone thinks is that is what you're looking like. And I just
Very
think
much
that
so.
people have got to understand that just because you put a smile on your face every day doesn't mean to say it's inside your heart. I just we need to
Yeah.
give everyone a bit of a break. We really do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I love that because it speaks to the kindness and the compassion, that this world needs so badly. And, but one of the things that I just didn't want to bypass when you spoke about Perfect Peter getting the top marks and then Ollie, who was doing well and then didn't. One of the things that iHeart is very big on, not fighting against, but challenging, is this notion that we as human beings, from a very young age, outsource or attach our sense of self worth or okayness or peace of mind to things like doing well in exams, achievements, status, people liking us. We outsource it instead of discovering it inside and seeing that it's inbuilt and it's a part of us and it's unconditional and it's not dependent on anything, which gives us a kind of locus of power within ourselves and resilience to walk around with. We start to outsource it and think, oh, if I do well at school, then that makes me worthy. And if I don't, then it can take it away. So it feels like there's something outside of ourselves that has this power to give and take away our well-being. And exam marks is a huge one for people. It feels like our future and our present and everything is dependent on this, our status and etc. And so when we're doing well, we feel like we're okay. And then when we're not, we feel like we're down in the dumps. And it builds up this incredible pressure and etc. When I go into a school in front of a teacher, when I've taught the session, on exams and exam pressure, I always say, if you think that this thing called exams can give you well-being or sense of self-worth and take it away, an A plus can give it to you and a D can take it away, like that's a lie. It's not true. It's not true because when you see that you have what you need inside of you, you're a worthy person, you have this inbuilt capacity for well-being, then you can do well, not do well, etc. Learn about why you're not doing well. Not everyone's cut out for academics, etc. And it could be the times in your life but it won't affect you. It won't affect your sense of self, etc. But our whole kind of education system, and as you say, the world of social media and the kind of messages and voices are a voice kind of, it's this message of lack, that you don't have what you need inside of you. Oh, but if you get this and you get that and you're that kind of person, then you'll fill this lack, and that's, I think, devastating our youth. It's creating this kind of non-resilient generation where they constantly feel like they're lacking what they need, and that kind of they're getting boosted by these things, and then that's been taken away, and they're almost like a puppet on a string. And that's what we're fighting against. And I just heard that in what you were saying, because it shouldn't. It's just all backwards, and I think it's so detrimental. I could go on all day about the changes to this kind of archaic education system, but I do want to bring us back a little bit, because I wanted to ask you about the day that Ali took his life. I wanted to ask you, like, because this will be on parents' mind, like, was there something about that day that like stood out for you in hindsight that you said, oh yes, there were warning signs, or did that day look
No.
like
So the night
no?
before, he was suspended, okay, from school. And
Mm-hmm.
he was allowed to go in to do his GCSEs. He had a
Mhm.
choice. He had a choice. Either he could go to school, and if he was naughty, they wouldn't allow him to do his GCSEs, or he could stay at home and then go in for
Mhm.
the GCSEs. And I decided that let's just keep him back at home, and then he can go in for
Mhm.
the actual exam. So I had a delivery. It was a Monday morning. I had a delivery from the supermarket. He messaged me to say he's put everything away, and I went, "Oh, thank you. What was that? Nothing unusual."
Mhm.
We had dinner in
Mhm.
the evening together. Scott was out. He was gone to Tottenham that evening. I'd gone to bed. Oliver then said to me, the last thing Oliver said to me was, "Mum, you forgot to buy the Ribena." Scott came home from
Wow.
Tottenham. I heard them two talking, and that's the end of it. Next morning, I got up, I went to work. The boys, Scott always made his own way to school. He was driving. Oliver was at home studying. Then I got a phone call. Um, so, did I think that day was going to be the day that my son was going to take his life? No. There was no warning signs whatsoever, apart from his erratic behaviour, and he was off school, suspended, and I knew he was struggling with the thought of studying, um, and that
Mhm.
he was missing a lot from not being in the classroom, 100%. And
Mm.
yes,
Mm.
he was banned from his geography lessons, and the headmaster said,
Mhm.
he said to the headmaster, "Well, I'll study it when the lesson's on, in the room that you put me in." And the headmaster said, "No, you're not allowed to study it.
Mhm.
You have to do it on your own time. You can't do it
Mhm.
during school time." So then this
Mhm.
was about 4 or 5 months before the exams, and then he called him in and said, "Okay, if we're going to put you up for studying this particular paper, then you have to do a test to make sure you know enough." So it's like, really? So
Mhm.
he did the test, and
Mhm.
he was third in
Mhm.
the year. Okay, so he came.
Wow.
No teacher
Yeah.
ever messaged him to say well done. Nothing, absolutely
Mhm.
nothing. So I knew
Mhm.
academically he was
Mhm.
able of getting a good grade.
Mhm.
So as far as that day goes, no, I had no idea that this was going to be the day that I was never going to be able to be with my Ollie ever again.
Wow. Wow. How does because a parent will be thinking this, like, how does a mother, like, how does that moment feel? Like, how do you react to that moment when you hear that news? Because every mother, I'm sure, or maybe not every mother, but I know that I try and go there in my mind, and I get to a point where it's so painful that I can't even go there. Like, it almost feels like I'm going to break. I can't go there. What happens when you hear, like, does your world fall apart? I mean,
Well,
how does that feel?
no,
The
no,
shock?
I was just so worried about everybody else.
Yeah.
I was, yeah, that's just me.
Really?
I was forget myself. I was
Yeah.
so concerned about Scott and his
Yes.
exams that he was studying. I was so concerned about my parents and
Wow.
my nieces and my nephews and my brother and my sister and his friends. I was just concerned about everyone else, how this was going to affect them. I mean, I knew there and then that
Yes.
and my partner, I knew there and then that my life was going to be different, completely different, because
Mhm.
I mean, it was always the boys. It's always the boy. I mean, still it is the
Mhm.
boys. I still
Mhm.
talk about it as if the boys, but I
Mhm.
was very concerned about everybody else, and it's only took me 4 years to finally worry about me. Yeah.
Really. Really. I was going to ask you that because I was going to ask you what you learned about the process of grief, and specifically because this grief isn't a typical grief. The loss of a child, especially in this way, is something that's not your grief that you're expecting in
Mm.
terms of losing a parent or losing someone who's chronically ill, even that you love. So what did you learn about grief,
It
that you could
hurts.
maybe share?
It really. hurts.
Mm,
You live in the past
mhm,
because that person hasn't a future. So you live up to that last
mhm,
day with that person who,
mhm.
and when you see people, I've caught myself now. I've realized that when I see certain people, I live in that last year with them of the fun times we all had, but they've had more fun times
Yes,
since. And so you've got to, I
yes.
need to readjust myself sometimes, but it really hurts. And it hurts me that my Scott doesn't have his brother, that he's not going to be an uncle. He's not going to have a niece or
Mhm,
nephew, which is 100%
mhm,
his. He's um, he's not going to have anyone to share anything with unconditionally. Um,
mhm,
and he's an only child now, and I never wanted him to be an only child. Um, and
mm, mm.
yeah, it just hurts. It really hurts. I don't think you can understand the pain unless you're there.
Yeah.
It's not. You have your children to have a future, and not for it to be. If it's taken away
Mm,
because they've got an illness that you can see and you've dealt with, and you've been to doctors and you've had medication and you've cared for and you've done everything possible. You have a bit of a closure, probably. I don't know. When they suddenly
yes.
say, "Mum, you forgot to buy the Ribena," and you never hear them say another word again, and you realise
Gosh.
what happens afterwards, that some of it I could have changed, and I could have stood up to certain people. Um,
Mhm,
it's hard. I mean, I don't blame myself for his death. I don't live with the knowledge that I could have done more. That's just being a parent. You can always do more for your children, full stop. You could always make them more food. You
mhm,
can always pick them up
mhm,
quicker than they asked them to, 5 minutes late. You always can do better. But I don't feel that
mhm.
I could I don't feel the blame for Ollie taking his death, and I think that's easy to live with. That I don't blame myself for Oliver
Yes.
passing at all, because I know this sounds awful. Maybe it sounds awful thing to say, but I know I'm a really good mum. I know I'm a really, really good mum.
Yes. That's beautiful. That sounds beautiful, and it sounds beautiful, and it actually makes me feel emotional because I feel like the default of a lot of people must be to blame themselves and think, etc., etc., and then that kind of it almost distorts the legacy of the relationship you had. I'm sure if these kids are here, they'd say you were a great mom, that wasn't the issue, etc. But it's often a default of human beings to start beating themselves up. So I mean, I think that's beautiful. I think it's very helpful for parents to hear this, because it's something that parents are very good at doing,
Yeah,
beating
I mean,
themselves up you know
no, I am a good mum. I still am a good mum. I've got a great
Mhm,
relationship with my eldest
mhm,
son. Um, there are things
mhm.
that he won't do, and sometimes I want to say, "Oh, well, Ollie would have done that," and you think you can't say that. Scott's always too busy to help me, but
Yes,
Oliver,
yes.
I've said to him, "Can you empty the dishwasher?" Coming, he would have done that. Things, little things. I'm talking like
Um,
little things in the home that everyone has. But
he unpacked the shopping on the day
yes,
that he
yeah,
took his life, and he told you that you needed to get more Rabina.
yeah.
I
He was
mean,
observant to everything. If I walk down the stairs in something, he'll
mm,
say, "Oh, you look nice, Mum." Where Scott was like, couldn't even think those words. He does now, but he didn't back then.
yes,
Um,
yes,
no,
yes,
Ollie was just my sunshine. He just made every room he was in light up. And the people who
yes,
who took his sunshine, who exhausted every ray he had, they've got a long life to live knowing what they
Mhm.
did to this child. And they're responsible and they can live
Wow.
their life however they want to live. But knowing under your charge, my son took his life. And I can't completely blame
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z because it's an accumulation of things, but they were
Mhm.
part of it. But to
Mhm.
me, I did everything for
Mm,
him
mm.
that I could possibly do, and I don't think he would ever say any different, and nor would Scott.
Yeah. Yeah. Does the this cliche about grief, and I feel very new to grief. I've had, I lost my father 6 months ago, and he was ill with cancer, fighting cancer for a while, and I lost my best friend also to cancer about a year and a half. He actually worked with me, my colleague. So I've started to touch into grief, but I feel quite new to it, and this kind of cliche, time heals. Like, how does that grief change from 4 years ago? Like you said, it took you 4 years to start to care for yourself, but I heard somebody saying, I spoke to actually someone yesterday who is married to someone, it's a second marriage, who lost their son. It wasn't suicide, or was a drug overdose, an accidental drug overdose. He was 19, also an exceptionally talented, beautiful young man. And she was saying that the pain and the hurt doesn't lessen. It's just, he said, you have life around it, like there's life around it, and sometimes, blessing and good things around it, but that's still there. I was just interested to know what your
Um,
experience is of that.
well, it doesn't lessen. I think it actually increases because every day is a day without. It's a day they've missed out on that day.
Mm,
Um, it catches
mm-hmm.
you. It really does catch you. I mean, we just had our first family simcha. We had a wedding and he wasn't there, and that really hurt. It really, really
Yeah.
hurt. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, there are moments, Scott's 21st, Scott's 18th, Ollie's 21st is this month, and everyone else in his year group is turning 21, and I still message them and wish them happy birthday and wish them everything possible for their futures. Because I do, and I believe they should have the best future. Just because Ollie's not here doesn't mean that I'm hardened to them being here. That's not who I am. But it's tough. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. I mean, after 21, you don't really shout about your birthdays anymore as a child. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
this is the last birthday that is sort of recognisable that Ollie's missing. Um, But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, every day. I mean, if you look at your home and if you've bought something new in your home, and you know, Ollie's never seen that. Ollie's never seen this. Ollie's never seen that.
Yeah.
I mean, I went away somewhere and
Yeah.
I caught myself. I thought, oh, I must tell Ollie. He would, and I went, I can't tell Ollie. I can't tell Ollie anything.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like your life continues without that person, and every moment of recognition that this life's continuing, but he doesn't, you're saying,
yeah,
is a moment
yeah.
of loss,
I mean, Ollie would
of pain.
talk and
Yeah,
talk and talk and
yeah.
talk and be convicted about what he was talking about, and you wouldn't be able to get your opinion in. And at least now, when I
Mm-hmm.
go to visit him, I talk to him, and I know he's not going to stop me. Like I'll sit there and I'll talk to him, and I I play the last music that I know that he listened to when I'm there. But if I hear it on the
Yes.
radio or at a party or something, I get very choked by that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I get very upset for other people when they pass away because I know what pain they're going to feel
Yes.
because I feel it.
Mm, yeah.
And people I don't even
Yeah.
know, when I hear they've lost their mother or something, I burst into tears because I'm just so upset for them.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it's really weird how
Wow. Yeah.
how sad I get for other people because I know how sad they're feeling.
Mm, mm. It makes it, but it's that compassion and that connectedness that you feel that you were talking about that we need to
Mm.
have for others, knowing that people are going through things and most times we don't have a clue what that is. But I wanted to say something to you that really strikes me about you and about two other incredible human beings like yourself that I've come across who've lost their children through suicide. One of them being Ian Russell, who's been in the news a lot and is a iHeart ambassador. And I remember the first time I met him, and it was quite soon after he lost Molly. And he came in, he actually sat in this room where I am now. And, I didn't know how he'd be. And the feeling that I got from him in the room, the energy was optimism. He was hopeful, he was optimistic, he had a mission, he wanted to make a difference. And we can just see now, a couple of years later,
Mm.
he has and is making a difference, right? And and again, somebody in North America who also lost their child, also advocating and fighting almost for the child who no longer has a voice, and then for the children who are
Mm-hmm.
still here and are struggling, and they too in a way don't have the voice that they to fight for themselves. And it seems like that's like motivating and driving them, and there's such a resilience about because you kind of think in your mind, if that happened to me or something, I just want to shrivel up in a corner and die. And I'm sure that there are moments of that, plenty moments of that but to this resilience which we teach here about, it's really the heart of our heart's work, is saying that there's a resilience that's built into human beings that, Albert Camus, the French existential philosopher, speaks about. No matter how hard life pushes at you, there's something stronger, more powerful, pushing right back. That kind of indestructible wholeness as opposed to brokenness that a human being can find within themselves and discover within themselves. It's very, very inspirational to see that. And I wanted to ask you, is that what motivates you kind of? It's like kind of the speaking for Ollie and speaking for those little Ollies around, those children who are around who are struggling now, and saying, no, this is not okay, and we're going to create change. Like, is that like kind of what gave you the strength to go forward and do the work you're doing with the Oli Leigh Trust to make, this kind of
Definitely. I
difference?
mean, um, yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? I mean, Ollie's voice was cancelled. They cancelled out his voice. They cancelled out his opinion and his validity. And I remember going to the school that Oliver was at, saying to them that if you don't support your children, look after your children, then have a look at your younger years, and some of them will be missing in a few years' time. And what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Someone else went missing in a few years' time. Someone else in that same school took their life because they hadn't addressed the actual issues in the school. And I'm not saying it's just, I'm only talking about the school
Mm-hmm.
that Ollie's was at, because that was where he was at.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this school had
Mm-hmm.
the only school in the country or the world that has these issues. Every school has these issues, and they need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can stop a parent, a family feeling like we do as a family, then mission complete.
Mm-hmm.
We just,
Mm-hmm.
some kids may not even have a family, but they have people there who care for them. And that's all that matters, because
Mm-hmm.
they were born into this world, they've got something to give to this world, and they matter. No
Mm-hmm.
matter what they believe or however someone's made
Mm-hmm.
them to believe, they matter. They're here for a reason. They wouldn't have been given life if there wasn't a reason for them all to be here. And schools just are not getting it. They're not getting that these kids matter, and
Yeah.
they're putting up fences to put us off, not to be able to get into the schools, to give the
Mm-hmm.
requirements that they need for training. They're scared. They're very scared. Schools are very
Yes.
scared of using the suicide word. We're not teaching you how to take your life. We're teaching you how to prevent and get into the point where you want to take your life. And you
Mm,
you're not doing your child any favors from that school at all by not having somebody come in and educate them and giving them an educational lesson. And it
mhm,
shouldn't just be one in the year. It should be three times a
mhm.
year or every term. They should be having a lesson. You should be making time to educate your child how to look after themselves, because if they don't know how to look after their inner self, then who knows what's going to happen to them in the future. I mean,
Yeah,
I used to
yeah,
say to Ollie
yeah.
that realistically your teacher is your boss. And if you misbehave to your
Mhm,
boss, you're not going to have a job. And that means you're not going to have a home. You're not going to have
mhm,
money to heat the home or anything. You're
mhm,
not going to have anything. So you have to learn to respect the people who are teaching you. But on the other
mhm.
hand, they've got to understand that something is going on behind, and therefore they need to address it.
Yeah. I think it's very important because from my point of view, I agree as a parent. I always said to my children that you're going to have teachers who don't treat you well, and you're going to come into life and have many people. You're going to have a boss who doesn't treat you well, colleagues, and that's something you've got to be okay with. You want to get resilient to that, because if you expect everyone you come across to like you and treat you well and fairly, that ain't life. So that was like my job, to kind of teach them that, and to also teach them that you want to have a sensitivity to the fact that you might feel, you want to distract or be naughty or talk, etc. But for the teacher who has 30 people, if every child took that liberty, it's impossible to teach, etc. So giving them kind of like, help, because as I kind of see, not all children, it's easy to regulate themselves in the classroom. Some children find it very easy to be good even when they're bored, and others find it impossible. So certain children need more work, etc. And I always used to say to the teachers when I spoke to them that you expect a child to change because you say, you come back tomorrow and don't behave that way and don't talk. I said, but have you ever tried to change your behavior overnight? No human being can. I mean, I'm grappling to change. My husband will say, please don't do that. And I'm like, well, I can't just stop. Like, we don't change overnight. You change what I call through insight, through self insight, and that can take time. And so our job is kind of to help our kids with that piece of it. But then you're saying from a teacher's perspective, there's a whole other piece, which is to look at this person who's struggling and grappling and not behaving well in the classroom, and
Mm.
to see the goodness in them and see what's going on underneath and behind that, and etc. And to be kind of loving and compassionate. And yes, you need to be fair and make sure the class functions and be practical. You can't stop the class all the time, but there's a way that you can deal with that person, as see their humanity. You want to see their humanity beyond their behavior, to their humanity. So both pieces are
You've got to meet in the
important,
middle. You can't just be the
So
one, you know,
yeah,
giving the orders. You've got to meet in the middle. I mean, it's like any relationship you have in
yeah,
life, you have to meet in the middle. And sometimes, you're on a seesaw and it goes up and
definitely.
down, whichever way. But to balance your world, you have to meet in the middle. And I think that
Yeah.
sometimes teachers believe they are God and they have authority above and beyond. And I don't think they know how to speak to children. And I think that they need to be re educated. It's a different world. Teaching is a
Mm-hmm.
different world from when I went to school, when we got the blackboard rubber thrown at us, or, we had to stand in the corner,
Mm-hmm.
or, had to sit outside the headmaster's office, or, anything, I got the
Yeah.
cane. I mean, I never got the cane, but, you know, um,
No, the cane was in our school. The cane, the ruler, the hitting the head against the
yeah,
blackboard. It was like hardcore.
if you were
Like
talking and the
yeah,
blackboard rubber came towards you and it got you, it got you,
what? Yeah,
it. But
different
the
world.
teacher
Yeah.
wasn't pulled apart and told off and what have you. And children seem to think that they also, I mean, that can be really cheeky. I mean, to say to the teacher,
Yeah.
that it's my right to have, I'm allowed freedom of speech. I love that one from children.
My gosh, yeah. Is that what's happening
I'm
in the
allowed to have
classroom?
my opinion.
Yeah.
It's freedom of
Yeah.
speech. Yes, you're allowed to have your opinion,
Hey,
but
yeah.
sometimes, you have to have an
Yeah.
inside voice and not an outside voice. So, you can't completely
Yeah.
blame children.
Yeah.
You can't completely blame teachers. We can just educate them. They just need some re-education on
Yeah.
how to deal with every child, because every child is a standout child. Whether they're quiet, whether they're clever, whether they're
Hmm.
naughty, whatever, they're a standout child, and every child comes with a different set of rules. And I think that's what they've got to realise. They all come with a different set of rules.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just on a hopeful side, in the work that we've done, we've equally met on both sides, teachers who are incredible. I mean, we've been in some schools in particular, you sometimes get into the schools where the children are really struggling. They're specifically for children who've been kicked out of mainstream schools. And, one particular school we went into, the BBC World News did a little report on it on our website. The teachers and people in the school, my gosh, did they see into the heart of the child? These children, that their behavior was totally unregulated and violent and physically violent towards these teachers. And they just saw that these kids were struggling, and they had to obviously physically make sure everything was safe and that. But the love they had for these kids was just beautiful. And even in mainstream schools, we have seen that as
Yeah.
well. But I mean, I'm with you. I think we like-minded in the work we do. Obviously, our Hearts curriculum that we put into schools is, it's all about a child understanding where resilience lies and what are the obstacles to it, etc. I mean, we've got great sessions on relationships, on bullying, on confidence, on, what gets in the way of confidence. And we've just added a new session on feelings, on dealing with difficult feelings. Because as you say, most human beings, even if you're not choosing to take your life, are trying to distract ourselves from these feelings, etc. And when we don't know how to deal with them, then they kind of build up and they sit there and they don't go away, and you kind of get stuck in them. And then we start to feel desperate. So, this kind of education, I always say, is the missing piece in our education. It is the foundation for any human being that's going to go out there and be a functional, contributing member of society. It's really, if that's not there, then everything else is going to be shaky. So I'm with you in that. But let me ask you a question about this is a question that's, I think, on a lot of parents' minds. We at the moment we're creating a new parent product at our heart, and part of the theme almost is helping parents to see that a lot of the time when our kids are struggling or grappling or a bit anxious or having troubles, parents kind of fly in and rescue their kids very quickly. They've got no tolerance like for their children not being happy. So it's almost like what you call helicopter parenting or snowplow parenting. We're going to clear the way so that you have an easy path. And children don't get to kind of grapple with life and learn, and start to get a very low tolerance for not feeling good because parents are coming in and fixing. I actually spoke to a parent yesterday that said to me, I just threw money and every practical solution I could at every one of my kids' problems while they were young and growing up, make sure they were sorted, fixed. And then they went to university and they fell apart because they didn't have the resources now to deal with the fact that they didn't get into that group or they didn't get the mark they wanted, etc., because I wasn't there to sort it out for them. So for part of our thing is helping parents to see that our job is to be supportive, and be a guide, etc. And but to help our children see that they can get through this, and that each time they get through something, they learn and discover something new in themselves, etc. So that's one of the themes of the parenting. But then on the other hand, you have this parent who's saying, I thought that my child was just going through the normal teenage moods, and struggling. Most teenage struggle. So I wasn't jumping in there and getting that involved, etc. I was letting them kind of get on with life. And then they either found out they had, a lot of suicidal thoughts, or they attempted to take their lives or did take their lives. And etc. And then parents are walking around thinking, should I be like not jumping in and saving my kids, etc., or should I be paranoid and thinking, as you said, a lot of the time it's invisible. a lot of the time our children just look like they're going through regular teenage things, and then you see no. So how do you think you find that balance as a parent, knowing that we got to let our kids independently go through life, grapple, learn, etc., become resilient people, not jump in and save them. But how do we also kind of be aware when a child does need more support than usual? Because it's not just the regular teenage ups and downs or moods. Is it possible to kind of know the difference?
I'm only going to talk about my opinion, obviously. I can't talk about
Mm-hmm.
how other
That
people should
goes,
do
yeah.
anything. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
think if it's your eldest one who is struggling, then you don't have a benchmark. But in my way round
Mm-hmm.
was that my eldest one was okay. It was my youngest one who wasn't, inverted commas, conforming. So I
Mm-hmm.
realized that it wasn't. Listen, I realized that was some things were just normal teenage stuff. You know, no, I want to go out. No, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going out. No, I want to go out. That kinds of thing. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
realized that was some of it, but then I realized it was a bit deeper as well. And I did take certain measures. I did ban him from going
Mm-hmm.
out. He wasn't allowed out. Um, I did lock the front door at night and hide the key. I wished I did it the night he took his life, but I didn't because Scott came home late that night. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I did. I did see that he needed some support. Support was not given by the doctor or school. They didn't find me any support. I had to do it
Mm-hmm.
independently. A single parent trying to
Mm-hmm.
earn a living, and it's difficult to give up time from your work
Mm-hmm.
to go and find someone for them. Extra
Mm-hmm.
money you've got to find, but as a parent, that's what you do. End off. Your child. You brought this child into the world. You're responsible for giving it life, and you look after them. It's like a puppy. It's not just for
Mm-hmm.
Christmas. You look after it. Whatever it does, you look after them. And um,
Mm-hmm.
I could see that Oliver needed some extra love, and it wasn't the kind of love that he needed with a hug and a cuddle. He needed some extra love by someone who was educated to learn how he could start to look after himself and love himself, because I think he stopped loving himself as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
I think he was stripped so much of his worth that he stopped loving who he was. And he could give love to other people,
Yeah.
but he couldn't
Yeah.
keep the love in for himself because it was like a colander, it just drained out.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
I did, like I said, I did absolutely everything for him, loved him, cared for him, treasured him, believed in him, um, encouraged him, everything I could possibly do. But if you've ever been in the position where someone has actually taken everything from you, then there's nothing anyone can
Mm-hmm.
ever give back. You've got, you become numb, and I think he became numb, and then he turned off. And
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
I think that you just can't give up on your kids, and I never gave up on Ollie. And I just think that you can always find the money to get your child a counsellor, because
Mm-hmm.
don't rely on the state, because Cam's told me that my son was not
Yeah.
suicidal enough to be dealt with. So I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
suicidal enough
Mm-hmm.
means, inverted commas, because until you actually do take your life, does that mean that you are suicidal? So you have to.
Yeah.
I think as
Mm-hmm.
a parent, you've got to be completely selfless. It's not about
Yeah.
you at all. It's about the children, and then it's you.
So you saying that there comes a stage where you recognize as a parent that this is beyond normal struggle that your kid is going through, and at that stage you're kind of all in. You need to be all in to support them, whatever's going on in your life. but that those signs are, you can recognize that this
You
isn't the
know exactly
normal
what's, yeah,
teenage angst.
completely. Not
Yeah,
coming out their
yeah, yeah,
bedroom, not
yeah.
eating, controlling what they're eating. Um,
Mm,
Listen, everyone has to tell their child a few times to stop doing what they're doing. But when they really
mm-hmm,
don't stop doing what they're doing, playing their music really loud, then you realize that they're actually becoming numb to anything you're saying because nothing matters to them apart from what they're doing. And I don't actually think it's the music they're listening to. I just think it's this noise that's cancelling out everything else within their
mm,
world. Not coming out
yeah,
their
yeah.
bedrooms. Ollie used to draw all the time. And some of his pictures that I
Mm-hmm,
found afterwards are pretty gruesome. I mean,
yes.
they really depict his mind of what he was feeling inside. I never found them until
Mm-hmm,
after. Um,
yes.
so it's always that sentence, you know, that you're sorry after. You can't be sorry at the time. And there's a lot of things that I found out after, and I wished I knew before.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Michelle, I guess, first of all, I want to ask you one final question, but I just wanted to thank you. Just thank you for your honesty, for your openness, for you're like a warrior. And I don't mean with an O, I mean with an A. You're like, as you say, a mummy warrior, and you're fighting for all our kids. And to say that it's not good enough, we got to do a bigger, better job, because this is preventable and it's not inevitable. And so it's almost like, oh, like, we can't do anything about it. This is what kids are up against. It's a difficult. You're like, no, there are, and you're doing that, and people like Ian are doing that, and obviously we're also in this fight with you and want to support you. And so really, really appreciate people like you. And I know you invited us and some other charities to Downing Street, and, you're to present and to talk about the work that needs to be done. And I just really, just want to thank you, on behalf of every parent who's listening to this, and not listening to this, just for the incredible work you do, like going through what you would have every right to go into your wherever it is, and disappear and etc. And instead you've just come out saying, no, it's not good enough, and I'm going to fight for the kids, and just thank you for that, and thank you for your support to our heart to do the work that we're trying to do with young people. So one final question to you. If you have one message for the world about suicide and suicide prevention, one message that you could get out there that would be broadcast, to the entire world about it, what would it be?
It's final.
Sorry to put you on
It's
the.
final.
Sorry?
You can't come back from suicide. It's final.
Yes.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can
Mm-hmm.
come back from a mistake. You can come back from everything apart from death. So don't
Mm-hmm.
take your life. Choose to live your life. Choose to change your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it will choose to make you happier.
Mm-hmm. Very beautiful and very powerful. And just thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation, and just really, just good luck with the battle and fight. I know it's not easy, but it's worth it. And as you say, that one child who gets that message and decides a different option for themselves, which I'm sure many of you don't even know about, because they're just sitting there in the classrooms, etc. But that's a big deal. They say in Judaism, if you
Yeah.
save one life, you save the world. So
Pleasure.
really,
Thank you for having
thanks,
me.
Michelle. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please follow or subscribe so that you can stay up to date with our latest episodes.